The following review contains spoilers. If you haven't seen the movie, please do so before watching this. It's been a while since I've been this conflicted about a movie from a reviewer's standpoint. On one hand, I absolutely love it, while on the other I can see that it has lots of objective flaws. Alita is one of the most interesting and lovable characters I've seen in a long time, while the others are decent at best. The world building is left incomplete, but that's how it's supposed to be, as this is only the first one in a hopefully long line of films. The ending is a bit messy, but obviously it sets up for a sequel, so I can't be too mad about the unanswered questions. The villain is still a mystery. We don't really know who or what he is or what even drives him, but the hero is again amazing and I couldn't get enough of her. The CGI looks, well, let's start with that with a little more detail. The movie begins and immediately I'm in awe with the CGI, as it looks very unnoticeable, which is the greatest compliment you can give to a CGI team. It looks exactly like live action and it blew me away from the first second they showed it. I found myself examining Alita's hands with her and being in just as big of an awe as she was. She looks real when I know she's not. That really impressed me. And later we do get a few characters who are clearly CGI, but that was kind of the thing with this movie and this world, so it didn't bother me much. Alita is the main character and the CGI on her looks fantastic, and that is the most important thing. She looked real to me, and later when her personality started to shine, she became real to me. And no, not actually real, but you know what I mean. She starts off as a blank slate of a character, no memory, no nothing, and later on she does quickly develop a personality of her own, but in the very beginning she's just a blank slate. And I think that helps with both the character building, believe it or not, and the world building, because we can put ourselves in her place. We can relate to her as she is oblivious to everything around her, and so are we. Or at least I was. I haven't read the manga, so I didn't know anything about this movie or this world going in. But as Alita was interested in the world, so was I. And in the many exposition and flashback scenes we had, I never once was bored or not interested, because the world and Alita are integral to one another. She is a part of its history, and so she wanted to know all about it, and as a result of that, so did I. And because I was so invested with her character, I hungered for more, just like she did. I wanted to learn about this world, and that is a world building process done right. It didn't feel like a documentary or a classroom, because it's all based on character, and the character we have is so incredibly interesting that I just couldn't get enough of her, and as a result I was interested. I mean, they could have done it the easy way. They could have had an exposition dump in the beginning, but they didn't do that, and I am so thankful for it. Alita is the heart of the movie and works as the magnet that draws us in. Even though she's a cyborg, she's so much more human than other lead characters from other movies that are supposed to be actual humans. She has a good heart and a strong need to do the right thing, but she is also naive and easily persuadable. I mean, had it not been for Hugo being in love with her, she would have died, as she was willing to give him her heart. She also let Ido's ex, and I can't remember her name, she's one of the weaker characters, but she let her use her heart in a surgical procedure, and had she been evil, she could have killed her. She has incredible strength, but is not invincible. I mean, Gruishka could have killed her had it not been for her friends helping her, and that is the point. She is not perfect. She has flaws that can be worked upon, and that makes her as human as any of us, and someone I could root for. I want her to succeed because I know she can fail. The only problem with her is not really her personality, as that is fantastic. It's, at least to me, her berserker upgrade. I think it would have been better if she didn't get it until the very end of the movie, because it kind of took her vulnerability away. She should have faced Gruishka in the end with her original body, as that would have heightened the stakes, because she already lost against him, and that would have been no doubt in her mind, and ours even more, if she had to fight him using the body that had already failed her. That could have resulted in a brutal fight, where in the end of it Gruishka would be dead, of course, and Alita in a state of disrepair, and then she gets the berserker body, and the film ends without her actually using it in combat until eventually in the sequel. Also, don't give me the excuse that she had her body destroyed mid-movie and so she couldn't have possibly used it again. Well, maybe Ido had enough spares to repair her, but only once. There you go, problem fixed. And I do kind of have another problem with Alita, although this is not necessarily that major. So she's depicted as a teenage girl who just happens to be a cyborg, but she does end up doing some un-teenage girl-like things in the movie. I mean, she goes from blushing at Hugo, gushing over chocolate and being a total fish out of water, to giving heroic speeches and building a strike force of her own by challenging everyone to fight her in a very small amount of time, and that kind of took me out of this. And yeah, I know that at the time she was rebelling against her father figure, but even still it was a bit much. And no, my problem is not that she fights, as there's a solid explanation for that. She's told to be drawn towards conflict thanks to her forgotten training, and that makes sense, but it's just that speech. It's a bit too soon for me. Maybe at the end of the movie she would do it thanks to the character development that happened, but at this point of the story, no. And talking about fighting, I absolutely love the first time she fights, where she finds out that not only can she fight, but also what happens when she fights. It gets pretty brutal, and as she turns to face Ido after her first kill, we can see the shock in her eyes. Whether or not that's because of what she had done or the brutality of what resulted when she did it, we don't know, but I assume both, because she lets the last guy live when she totally could have killed him if she had wanted. And from that we can figure out that she doesn't want to kill people. She's okay with hurting them as long as she doesn't kill them. But this is again the beginning of her arc. She hadn't yet learned about Vector or Nova, and when she did, her bloodlust was understandable. And speaking of the villains, they were definitely the weakest part of the film. I mean, Nova is the bad guy, and after the movie I couldn't tell one thing about him, other than he's evil and has to be stopped. And Vector is only the henchman, and he's pretty boring too. This is because he doesn't have a personal interest in killing Alita. He's only doing it because Nova wants it, not because he wants it. It's as boring of a motivation as money. It's not personal and it's not interesting. The side characters were a bit better, mainly Ido and Hugo, or the father and the boyfriend. They at least had some motivation and conflict within them. Ido with his dead daughter, and Hugo with his need to reach Zalim by any means necessary. He goes from capturing cyborgs and stripping them for parts to not wanting to do that because of his love for Alita. And in the end, when he's dying in her arms, confessing everything to her, even I was starting to get a bit emotional, as it was so well done, until my biggest problem with this movie happens. Why did Hugo have to die twice? If he has to die, do it once and do it well. I mean, I liked how it was going. They hooked his head to her heart and rescued him, and I was like, okay, that's pretty clever. But then 5 minutes later he dies anyway. Why? Why not have a single scene done well rather than two done decently, I grant you, but there was potential there for so much better. And as we're getting to the problems of the movie, let's get a few more out the way now. The ship where Alita finds her berserker body is not stripped for parts. Why? I mean, they explain why by saying that this is URM tech and wouldn't be worth much as people wouldn't completely understand it. But excuse me while I call bullshit on that one. The excuse that it's just too advanced doesn't hold up at all. People would have absolutely torn that ship to bits trying to find something of value in there. I know I would have. I mean, imagine an alien ship crash landing to Earth and all of our scientists being like, nah, that's too complicated, let's not research that. We probably wouldn't understand it anyway, let's leave it there, yeah, that's a good idea. No, stupid. But we have to have that ship there, because that helps Alita discover more of who she is, and she finds her berserker body there. But I think there could have been a better way to do this. Maybe you could have the ship have its shields still activated, and so no one can get to it except Alita, who is URM tech herself too. That could have resulted in a wow moment too, and made more sense in the process. And from there let's jump straight into another problem. So Alita has an antimatter reactor as her heart, right? Which apparently can power the whole city if needed. Or maybe that line was just a metaphor of the goodness in her heart that can help the whole city. But the way Ido said it, I think not. I think he meant that Alita does have the power to supply the entire city with electricity, and that would mean that she is incredibly strong. She's not. And yeah, I understand that her weak body probably can't handle the power, but the Berserker body is built for it, and with that in mind she should have been much stronger after her upgrade, and the only explanation of why she's not would be that maybe she hasn't discovered how to use it yet, but that's not stated in the movie, and if it was I'd be more forgiving, but it's not, so here we are. So that's the problems done, or at least the problems I could think of. Now let's talk some more about the positives I haven't yet touched upon. The action scenes. I already talked about the CGI, but the action needs to be appreciated too. And I was very impressed with how they did it in this, because even though things can get pretty chaotic, I never once was lost. I knew where all the characters were and exactly what they were doing, and that is made even more impressive if we compare this to some other movies where there might just be two guys in a room fighting with fists, and then they'd use close-ups, shaky cam, and 1,000 cuts a second to ruin it. But this doesn't do that. I think the most chaotic we got was the motorball scene, where there were several characters at once, all with the objective of killing Alita, using their various weapons and abilities to do so. It was fast, chaotic, and thanks to the cinematography, a joy to see. And the positives just keep stacking up. Alita was fantastic, but we already talked about her. CGI, great. World building, work in progress, but still interesting. And basically, there are a lot of great things about this movie, but there's a lot of bad too. And I can totally see where most of the critics are getting their ammunition from. But personally, to me, the positives by far outshined the negatives. The main one being Alita, who is such a great character that I wished she was real. I honestly can't tell the last time I saw a character this good prior to this. This movie just pressed all the right buttons for me. I'm a male in my 20s working in a multi-shift job, and this movie offered me 2 hours of escapism, and for those 2 hours I was free of the bills and the early mornings and the politics of real life. I was in an adventure with Alita and loved every second of it. I don't care that it's not a perfect movie. I recognize that it has flaws and they may get in the way for some people, but not me. And I think some of those flaws could have been deflected had they called this part 1 or something. I mean, it obviously is, but calling it that could have helped with some of the critics, maybe, at least from what I've heard. By the time of doing this review, I've seen the movie twice and will see many more times in the future, and I'm in a desperate need of a sequel, more so than I've been ever, I think. But before that hopefully comes along, I'm gonna see this again while it's still in theaters, and I hope some of you will too. Thanks.